So thank you, Craig, for the wonderful introduction. I must say it's a bit intimidating to be the last person to go in this series and stand on the shoulders of such amazing scholars who have presented this year. And I am sure you will all agree this has been a great collegial and community initiative. And we have learned so much about each other's work and had some great conversations. And if you've stayed behind afterwards, it's been amazing. And the food and wine have helped a lot. And so thank you for that. So please join me in thanking Craig for the community, for this community building initiative, and to Catherine for organizing and for all that she has done for this. So please thank her. It's been amazing. So thank you for the opportunity this evening to share a bit of my work, both from a teaching and a research perspective, and a little bit about my philosophy for enabling Aboriginal education and success at it. My talk this evening, as Craig said, is entitled Two-Eyed Seeing, a Different Vision for Teaching Aboriginal Learners Science, Mathematics, and Technology, or SMT. Or as my young male students that I work with have stretched the acronym to SMUT, meaning Science, Mathematics, and they tell me Understanding Technology. But we won't go there tonight. So before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional land of the Blackfoot people that we are guests upon this evening, and welcome all from community who are present. As a person of Cree descent, I've had the great fortune to be welcomed into this territory by my Blackfoot friends and colleagues, in spite of the history of the Cree and the Blackfeet. And I've had some amazing opportunities to work and collaborate with educators and members of the community to explore ways to bridge cultures and enable success for our Aboriginal learners. So tonight, I want to address some stereotypes, the awkwardness experienced in not knowing the other, perhaps dispel some myths, such as Indians can't do science and mathematics, and open the door to conversation about bridging cultures and teaching and learning in a different way. I'll read a little so I can keep myself on track. I tend to become tangential, and show you a little bit of video, and perhaps do a little bit of hands-on at the end of the evening if we have enough time. So much of the awkwardness we experience begins with terminology and using the right word or words to ensure that we don't say the wrong thing or offend. This is in itself a roadblock. Indian, for example, is one of those words. For much of my life, I belonged to the goddamned Indians. Such a blessing. And then with human rights and political correctness, we now belong to Aboriginal, Indigenous, Native American, or simply Native, or Finmi, as my good non-Aboriginal, that's the new term for white, friend Andy Glover, jokingly pronounces the acronym FNMI for the mouthful First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. Within are still comfortable with the term Indian, but to clarify, for tonight's talk, Indian will refer to my partner's heritage, because as he often points out to me in our discussions, he was born in Bombay, now Mumbai, India, thus making him the true Indian. And since I really don't like being the goddamned Indian, I will interchangeably use Aboriginal, Native, and Indigenous to refer to the peoples and their paradigm of this land. My teaching and research are focused on the space between Aboriginal ways of knowing and learning and the white Western education system, as many, myself included, refer to it. This space I call the liminal space. I see it as a space of possibility rather than as a gap, as it is most often seen and judged by those who do the measuring and collecting of numbers. Aboriginal learners are always measured against the dominant, and as such have always fallen short. This deficit approach does not account for different ways of knowing and learning, rather measures performance outcomes against a rigid standard through a monoculture, academic, and policy-driven lens. My argument, Aboriginal ways of knowing and learning are both unique and valid, and if we come to understand their unique approaches to learning, then we can each bring that uniqueness to the liminal space and create something better. We already know assimilation doesn't work, so let's not expect each other to give up their ways, but rather bring that to the space between and educate each other and enable success. So while I would love to share and thoughts about enabling Aboriginal academic success. In the interest of time and to ensure I don't put you to sleep, I will touch on 3 methodological approaches I have been exploring and using to successfully engage Aboriginal students in science, mathematics, and technology, and end with some of my thoughts on bridging forward. I am of Métis heritage through my paternal lineage, and without going into particulars, my story mirrors that of most other families who suffer the imprint left by colonialism and the compounded legacy of residential school, religion, and the foster care system. In my family, high school completion was extremely rare, and pursuing a post-secondary education certainly never considered. No one had ever done that. So in my family, I was an anomaly, that alone electron, and sadly often criticized for my pursuit of education. But I loved the sciences, and I loved writing, and I saw post-secondary education as the way out and forward, and it has been a lifelong journey. In the Aboriginal community, the philosophy that education is the way forward is relatively recent and still being accepted. You will often hear, education is the new buffalo, but the legacy of enforced education has left many scars that are now beginning to heal. And while many now believe this new philosophy, it is education in its current methodological approach that is still exclusionary to Aboriginal learners, similar to the way in which science, until only recently, was exclusionary to women. We are in a current global environmental and economic crisis, and we have arrived here through the explosion of advances in science and technology without paying due care and attention to what we are doing. And now we have to fix the situation. But who's going to do this? There are projected professional shortages in all areas of the economy, and particularly in science, mathematics, and technology, with the retirement of the baby boomer population, and the fact that the generation today are having fewer and sometimes no children. This presents a critical replacement situation. Current pressure is already being felt in rural and remote areas. This projected deficit provides a critical opening for the fastest growing population, the Aboriginal population. In fact, in the next 5 to 10 years, we are going to see a significant increase in Aboriginal students in the education system at all levels. It is a critical time of building bridges and creating paths to enable Aboriginal academic success at all levels. In order to enable success, I believe we have to start very early, in elementary school, and be attentive through to high school completion, so that Aboriginal students have the academic grounding to enter into and succeed at post-secondary education in disciplines of their choice. My focus is specifically on bridging cultures to enable success in science, mathematics, and technology, because that is where the greatest challenges lie. Aboriginal people are critically underrepresented and have little voice in science-related professions at all levels. This has many far-reaching ethical implications, one of the greatest being that of equality of voice, representation, and treatment. There is this adage that natives can't do science or mathematics, as Leroy Littlebear often jokingly says before he proceeds to explain the native perspective on science. My own teaching experience and the outcomes of my doctoral and current research disprove this statement. It might be more accurately stated the natives often can't do science, mathematics, and consequently technology in the way it is taught in the Western academic system, a way that poses an exclusionary roadblock to the ways of knowing and coming to know for Aboriginal peoples. I'm sorry I'm reading so much. I cannot see with that light there. It's crazy. Thank you. Wow. Thank you very much. As an oral culture, Aboriginal knowledge is not written down in textbooks or stored on shelves for reference or posterity. All things, the animate, inanimate, and spiritual, are related and interrelated and considered critical to lifelong learning and living. Knowledge is held by cultural experts such as elders in stories, in ceremony, in traditional practices, and teaching is by demonstration, and learning is by doing and application. The laboratory for Aboriginal people is the real and applied world. Learning is not a linear process in in this paradigm, and each time around one learns a little deeper. Rather, there are continuous and multiple opportunities to a cycle, and each time around one learns learns more and at a deeper level. Sorry about that. Failure is not built into the paradigm, but rather learning is a lifelong cyclical and continual process. This philosophical difference between Aboriginal ways of knowing and learning and Western ways of knowing and learning results in a paradigm clash. And it is this clash or juxtaposition in ways of knowing and coming to learn that I believe presents the key challenges for Aboriginal learners in the white Western system. So then how do we enable success? We hear much about indigenizing the curriculum, putting Aboriginal history into the curriculum so Aboriginal people are represented in the texts and the materials we use for teaching. Our one philosophy is if they see themselves in the text, they will be able to associate with the concepts we are teaching, and this will make learning easier. I agree to a certain degree. I agree to a certain degree, but I believe indigenizing the curriculum has to be done at the very least with Aboriginal people to get it right, because that is where Aboriginal people to get it right, because that is where much has been done that is incorrect. As well, there are more than 600 Aboriginal groups in Canada alone, and each is its own unique culture. So it is not equitable nor ethical, in my opinion, to teach about one specific culture as if it were a pan-Aboriginal culture. Nor do we want tokenism, misrepresentation, or mispresentation, as has happened in the curriculum history. There are many educators now, especially the new learners, still largely non-Aboriginal, who do want to be inclusive and who do want to enable Aboriginal success in the best way. But they are nervous to venture into the realm of Aboriginal education because they are not Aboriginal themselves, or have very little knowledge about Aboriginal culture and are afraid of making mistakes or offending. And we certainly don't want to repeat the legacy left by the historical attempts to educate the Indian initiated by Duncan Campbell Scott. So we need a different approach, one that attends to Aboriginal ways of knowing and learning and bridges cultures with a two-eyed seeing perspective, as Dr. Cheryl Bartlett and Elder Albert Marshall suggest. It's one of those nights, isn't it? I wish. In my current position as coordinator of the First Nations Transition Program, as well as in my research on reserve with high school students and bridging to and through post-secondary education, I've had the opportunity to be immersed in teaching cohorts of FNMI students and to witness their struggles in learning Western science, mathematics, and technology. I don't see it that way, or it just doesn't make sense. Or how does that relate to me are the most common statements I hear, statements that allude to lack of context for most of my students. Additionally, the textbooks we use to teach science are daunting and written in a language for which there is no bridging vocabulary in the Aboriginal paradigm. In this Western system, we expect them to jump over these large chasms between the two paradigms without any bridges and learn in the Western way we have been taught. But that has not and still is not working. While I may be Métis, I lived between urban life and my rural roots, and I myself have essentially grown up Western educated. So in that sense, I have been lucky to have at least a bridging context that has enabled my learning and relative success at it. Social and economic issues aside, Aboriginal ways of knowing and learning and lack of relevant bridging context, I believe, are the key roadblocks to Aboriginal success in science, mathematics, and technology. So here's my question. What if, as educators, we put away the crutch, the textbook, the traditional methodologies and practices of teaching and begin in a different way, from a hands-on, practical, learning by doing approach first, to build a foundation of context and bring in the theory later, because without context, one does not have a frame of reference. Just as in learning to ride a bicycle, one first has to know what a bicycle is, how to obtain one, and then learn how to ride one by doing it. There is no amount of reading or having someone tell you how to do it that will substitute for seeing a bike, actually getting on the bicycle, and trying to ride it. And if you were as unfortunate as I was, going at breakneck speed downhill into the barn door. I doubt that cautions not to use that particular methodology would have been in any book of instructions should have I had access to one anyway. And nowhere in those instructions, I'm sure, would it have talked about scraped knees, a bloody nose, a black eye, and the effect of unsuccessfully riding a male-framed bicycle on female anatomy. And certainly there would be no cautionary phrases about downhill starts with no brakes or barn doors as impediments to riding, albeit a highly effective alternative means to braking. Context and practical experience made all those things very clear to me. But importantly, in learning to ride a bicycle, I've been able to expand my experience and knowledge to road races and triathlons and bike trip holidays, activities that would not have been possible without that initial learning experience. So then how can we expect students, particularly those who have no context about what we are teaching and expecting them to know, to learn such complicated subjects such as chemistry, biology, physics, mathematics, or any of the other subjects that begin most often in the abstract and aren't taught in an interrelated fashion in the way they truly exist? More specifically, how can we expect them to learn a subject for which there is no formal context or vocabulary in their own culture? Talk about putting barn doors in their path to block them. Ouch. So for the remainder of this presentation, I would like to present 3 successful projects that attend to Aboriginal ways of knowing and learning as templates, methodological approaches to engaging and teaching Aboriginal students. While this work is focused on science, mathematics, and technology specifically, the methodologies can be applied more generally as well. In being cognizant of my allotted time, I will only be able to give you a sense of how they work, but I'm happy to share more with anyone who's interested. So the first of these is teaching science through theater, which began some time ago with Annette Brewsted, principal of Kainai High School on the Blood Reserve. And she was also a former chemistry student of mine at the University of Lethbridge. I'm really sorry. What not to do when you have a microphone. Okay, lessons learned. So she's the principal of Kainai High School on the Blood Reserve, also a former, as I said, chemistry student. And we began having conversations about the issues we saw as paramount to the struggles, the lack of engagement and high attrition rate for Aboriginal youth we were seeing in science, mathematics, and technology. And we wondered if we moved away from the traditional Western way of teaching science and mathematics and invited the students into a different science conversation using more culturally relevant methodologies such as performance, narrative, story, hands-on first, learning by doing, and learning as community, could we engage them and could we keep them engaged? 2 successfully funded projects, Chemistry Through Theatre and Bridging Paradigms, Teaching Aboriginal Science Through Performative Inquiry, born of those conversations, confirmed our philosophy that if we engage Aboriginal students in different and creative ways, make science and mathematics fun and relevant culturally and at all levels to their lives, then they are more likely to engage and stay engaged. And I'll share one of these with you in a few minutes. The concept of this was born from my master's degree, in which I developed a narrative periodic table where each of the elements and their interaction with each other was illustrated with a narrative short story. Those who read my stories would often tell me how it enabled them to understand a particular concept by putting it into a context they understood. Teachers would often ask for the stories to use in their own classes. So I began using narrative and performance in my own teaching practice and would demonstrate a theoretical concept with a mini skit involving the students. Bonding, for example, was one of their favorites. I would have them demonstrate the difference between ionic and covalent bonds in terms of attraction to another person, dating as covalent bonds, and commitment or marriage as ionic bonds, topics that were the focus of their current adolescent lives. In thinking about the various chemical reactions, they became very creative in their own scenarios. It was easy to expand bonding concepts to the effects of bond breaking with a jealous girlfriend as the contaminant who breaks up the relationship, and various scenarios expanded and more from there, as you can well imagine. I could then take those stories and further demonstrate them in the real chemistry laboratory, and finally in terms of theoretical and pedagogical chemistry. And so it made for many aha moments for the students. The concept of learning through performing became the foundation for teaching science differently through performance and theater. Our work took place with grades 10 and 11 high school students at Kainai High School who had not yet taken or were just beginning to take chemistry. Nearly all were daunted by this course. The students who participated in the project received elective credits towards their high school diploma, and we alternated between working at the high school and working at the university so that the students would be comfortable with being at the university, and in the future, it might not seem like such a foreign or a daunting place to come. Additionally, we had the good fortune of having experienced theater academics volunteer and provide their expertise on the project. Dr. Lisa Doolittle from the university, and if any of you have seen her latest production, Unlimited, it's amazing, and Troy Twigg, a well-known performing Aboriginal artist from Community, and also a graduate of the U of L. He was a great inspiration and a mentor for the students. The goal of this project was to bridge cultures by writing and performing a cultural story from a two-eyed seeing perspective and finding the relational or chemistry reactions in it. Together, the students selected their favorite Napi story, Napi and the Rock, a traditional Blackfoot story they were all familiar with. And for those of you who don't know, Napi is a trickster in the Blackfoot stories and is often the instigator of much trouble. They use this story as the foundation for the script they themselves wrote and the theatrical production they created and performed. And I'll set the stage for you, and then I'll show you a little bit of a video clip. Hopefully that works, Cal. Yeah? You say yeah? Okay, good. The setting of the story, the setting of this story is the Blood Reserve, and it's situated on the prairie with a beautiful backdrop, as you see, of Chief Mountain. And it's prefaced by the Belly Buttes, the Timbers, the Elbow River, Cypress Hills, and the prairies. And in the play, very few props were used. Rather, the bodies of the students, choreographed, became the set design that morphed in and out as the actors of the play. The above-described geography of the reserve became the scenes, and two of the lesser shy students became the elder and the scientist who grow out of the scene and meet. Their duo ethnographic conversation throughout the play as they sit on the sidelines is intended to teach each other about their respective approaches to science. The elder teaches the scientist the cultural science, and the scientist points out the chemistry reactions, or the Western science, in the story. The students perform the story and the chemistry reactions in a slapstick comedy fashion. Okay, let's see. You have that going? All right. No, me? But what happened to the... So do I have... There we go. Trying to. There we go. Okay, so you can imagine that as the backdrop. I'm going to do this in two parts. If I can diminish this.
Blaze, Tyson, as soon as they change, go. That's your cue.
up with their own. They saw, the story goes for about an hour and a half, so I can only show you little bits of it. But they came up with their own. They did their own slapstick.
7, 8, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2. Yeah, I'll say.
So what kind of reaction was that? Yeah, okay. I know Chris is in the audience. Chris, what kind of reaction? Oh, I stumped him. Pardon me? How about a simple addition reaction? They would know that. So now you might think, I'm just going to go back here for a second. So now you might think that's all fine. But what did they learn? Remember, these are students who had no chemistry or very little chemistry background. And when the project was over, I brought in materials for each of the reactions. So there are 6 basic reactions that we worked with in those stories. And I brought in the materials for each of those reactions to see if they understood them. And not only could they tell me what each reaction was, they could give me examples, both from an everyday perspective as well as from a cultural perspective. So they went on and took further chemistry courses. Some of them are actually at the university now. So one of the unintended outcomes or key factors and of critical importance in the success of these 2 projects was the sense of community that was created among the students. We began to think of our project in terms of an after-school club. What if we offered it over the course of the year, and what if we offered it partly at Kainai High School and partly at the University of Lethbridge to keep and further build that bridge? The students had really enjoyed coming to the U of L campus as it was exciting and different, and it engaged them. And it enabled us to access amenities such as technology, laboratories, and the library, as well as some of the recreational facilities such as the pool, the climbing wall, the gym, the food court where they like to spend a lot of time, and the bookstore. And at the U of L created a relational thread that we wanted to further build upon. So with this in mind, we invited Dr. Jackie Rice, a computer science professor at the U of L and co-founder and coordinator of BlueMaps, a computer science outreach program, who had done much work on engaging youth in computer science in fun and non-intimidating ways. Together we brainstormed the concept of a science, mathematics, and technology club for Kainai High School students that interwove science and mathematics with technology through fun, engaging, and fun-to-them projects. Belonging to a club provides a sense of community of like-minded peers, and as such can be a positive learning environment. The FNTP and Craig's current first-year experience initiatives both mirror this concept. The club opens a space to explore in fun and creative ways, and importantly provides a sense of belonging. As educators, it enables us to work with the students in a relaxed environment and learn methodologies for successful learning engagement and ways to build bridges between Aboriginal ways and Western ways of knowing and learning. I'm really sorry. The Kitsum Club, or Kainai Kikimut, to learn, which means to learn, Technology, Science, and Mathematics Club, was the name given to the club by the students. Its threefold purpose was to engage the Aboriginal youth in science, mathematics, and technology, to provide an interesting and creative and safe space for Aboriginal youth after school, and to develop mentorship of the young Aboriginal youth by older Aboriginal youth. Importantly, as educators, we wanted to know from the voice and experience of the youth themselves what works and doesn't work, to enable their engagement and participation in school, and particularly in science, mathematics, and technology. Of the numerous projects we did and activities that they chose, the students chose robotics as the main year-long project. They built a competitive robot and entered into the first robotics competition in Calgary. They were the only Aboriginal team in the competition And while they never placed in the finals, they spoke of the experience and the sense of community pride and voice they felt in belonging to the club. It provided them a space and a place to be themselves. Importantly, they considered SMT, or Science, Mathematics, and Technology, to be fun and engaging, and they could see themselves pursuing science at a higher level. One of the greatest outcomes for me was that all of the grade 12 students in that club graduated last year. 90% went on to post-secondary education of some sort. At their graduation speeches, more than half said chemistry through theatre and the Kitson Club were highlights of their high school learning. A number of those students are now in our First Nations transition program at the U of L and at Lethbridge College. So a little bit about the First Nations transition program for those of you that don't know a lot about it. The First Nations transition program began some 10 years ago at the U of L with the intention to provide otherwise ineligible First Nations students an avenue to enter into the university. Since then, it has morphed and undergone much growth and change, and our now completed quality assurance review shows that students who enter into the program are retained and succeed at a significantly greater rate than even non-Aboriginal students. So my dream is to expand it to be inclusive of all FNMI students who wish to enter the U of L through the FNTP. As I said earlier, science and mathematics are a hurdle for First Nations students, and in this program, it is no different. One of the courses I teach in the program is chemistry, and that is often a daunting roadblock for them. Add to it, as I previously described, no cultural context at any level and a different learning style, and it is nearly insurmountable. When I first started teaching this course, there was a 1-hour lab component associated with it in an early morning time slot. Students were rarely able to make the 9 a.m. time on time, especially if driving in from the reserve. And for students who had never been in a lab, a 1-hour time slot was always truncated and was simply ridiculous. I would nicely get started and have to stop, and I seemed to be getting nowhere, and both the students and myself were frustrated. So I went to my associate dean, Dr. Miriam Mello, who fortunately listens to my concerns and requests, and after a period of time, 1 hour became 3 hours, comparable to other chemistry courses, and that helped. While the longer lab time was helping, it still wasn't enough, and the connection between theory of the text and the practical in light of cultural ways of learning was still a challenge. A key indicator for me was when I saw engagement and had full attendance in the lab and success, and students and disengagement with the text and theory. This was further augmented by the semester. Hello. I was in the bookstore, and 2 of my students were returning their books for a refund. Now you might think, so what? Many students do. However, my students were returning their books, still nicely wrapped, unused, in cellophane. And when I asked them what about it, the reply was, well, the text makes no sense. We just listen to you, and we take notes. Kudos to me, I suppose, but not really. It confirmed for me what I deeply knew and was fighting at this level, that we need to teach differently in ways that attend to Aboriginal ways of knowing and learning. We need to be flexible, creative, responsive, and approach teaching and learning differently in order to move outside the current curriculum and teaching box. My niggling question was, what if we put the textbook away for a while? Obviously, they aren't using it anyway, and do the practical hands-on first, and then work our way to theory. Might we see greater success? Well, this may be deemed backwards. It is actually the way of coming to know in the Aboriginal paradigm, which is learning by doing first. And so it's not really a new concept. And secondly, what if we begin with the Aboriginal paradigm first and bridge to the Western? Can we build the bridges from the opposite direction? Does it really matter as long as the bridges are built? So 4 years ago this term, with the permission from said Dean Muriel, I decided to eliminate the textbook, an expensive book they obviously weren't using anyway, and write my own materials and teach the course entirely in the laboratory. I wanted to find the connection and jumping off points, both in learning style and in bridging paradigms, that would enable their success so they could then move on to upper level science courses. So here's a little about how it works, and I'm happy to share more later if you want. For each concept I am teaching, tried to begin from an Aboriginal paradigm first, to show that the concept does exist in the Aboriginal paradigm, and it's just not named or understood as such. And then build to the Western paradigm and the theory, because they still need to bridge and have the chemistry concepts. So the medicine wheel is the cultural link that I use as the template. So a little bit about the medicine wheel. The medicine wheel to the Aboriginal paradigm, and much of the teachings, the seasons, ways of being, spirituality, to name just a few, are metaphorically represented in the medicine wheel. Whatever its representation, the medicine wheel is always divided into 4 equal parts that are continually cycled through, allowing therefore the opportunity for multiple chances to engage in each cycle. Each time around, one learns more than the time before. It is a continual learning process, providing unlimited chances at success without the inclusion of failure, which is unlike the beginning to end linear teaching, learning, and assessment process of the Western paradigm. So for my chemistry course, I chose to work with the seasons. Spring is a time of planting, new beginnings or new ideas. Summer, the time of growth or doing, the hands-on practical. Fall, the time of harvest or analysis. And winter, the time of storage, processing, and moving and bridging to the next cycle. This template, or lesson plan as we call it in education, forms the outline for each concept I teach in every class. And for those of you who know science, it closely parallels the Western scientific method we teach. Some of the major differences, though, in the Aboriginal paradigm are the non-linearity of the process, the cyclical nature of learning, and the ability to engage and work together collectively and collaboratively, and presenting results from a first-person perspective. These are generally not acceptable in the scientific method. So spring is the introduction as we know it in the Western system. Each class begins with a 5 to 10 minute introduction of the concept we are learning that day, and in introducing this concept, I provide a bridging context. I begin with the Aboriginal paradigm first to illustrate that the concept actually does exist in the Aboriginal world, but it is seen with a different lens, and it's not defined by the chemistry terminology or the scientific terminology. This brief introduction is followed by a question, what do we want to know? Which then leads to the practical component represented in the summer of the medicine wheel. This part is comprised of an experiment or some hands-on activity that enables the students to learn by doing. It's the most engaging part, and I encourage collaboration as the fundamental pedagogy, as I said, of the Aboriginal paradigm is to share knowledge in order to enable others. This is, of course, counterintuitive to the Western way, and especially in science, where competition is key and sharing is not encouraged, and is often seen or judged as cheating. I have found my students learn best by helping each other, working on topics collaboratively, and if they can explain it, then they can understand it. And so that works very well. And we work on projects. So my place in this is as a facilitator or guided practice. And as is in, I ensure the students are safe, doing things correctly, learning good scientific technique, but a large part of their learning is through experience and practice. So I stand back and allow that to take place. Certainly mistakes happen, but I like to think of it as learning happens as a result. So once the practical or the experimental or the summer growth part is complete, then it is time for the analysis of fall and coming to understand through the results and bridging that to the theory, because now the students have a context that I can work with. So as an example, if I want to talk about reproducibility, then I can bridge that to the cycles of the medicine wheel and how each time around we learn a little more, if only simply by reproducing the cycle before. I can then talk about how that is related to prediction, hypothesis, concepts that are present in the Aboriginal paradigm as well as in the scientific paradigm. And the students I have found are able to do this very easily. While the terminology might be foreign to them initially, they find the concepts are not difficult when they can make that bridging connection. And once they have that, the scientific vocabulary becomes easy. Okay, sorry guys. I'm just not going to chew the ice this time. Okay, so winter, the last part of the cycle, is the rest and processing time, and that, and deciding how to move into the next cycle. So taking what we know in the summer and the analysis of our results of the fall and moving that into what do we want to do next. So I always have the students think about what they have learned, but importantly how it applies to their own lives and how they can think about it in the context of other things in their life, not just chemistry. So what knowledge is of most worth, as Herbert Spencer asks, and how do we move that forward in a different kind of way? So I'll share some important outcomes. Well, this is still a work in progress. This is the 4th semester run from a fully hands-on approach. Each is different because each group of students comes in with a different skill set. So there are continual adjustments and, importantly, continual modifications for improvement. Where I would have very low grades and a high dropout rate and a high failure rate before, I seldom now fail students. Of great year, 6 of the 9 students went on into the sciences. 1 was accepted into nursing, 1 was accepted into pre-medicine, and the others were focusing their studies on undergraduate science-related careers in education, mental science. So I continually seek feedback from the students about what is and isn't working, but unanimously they all say they get it when they see it and do it first, and wish more courses could be taught that way. So some future direction. Some time ago I had the opportunity to meet Charles Fidel, who wrote the book, The 21st Century Learner. I truly believe the 21st century learner and the children of today, as well as the First Nations learner, are not really that far apart. If you look at today's learners, how do they learn? Not generally by textbooks, except we still give them textbooks. They learn by doing, by exploring, by resourcing, the internet, collaborating with each other, generally over text, but don't get me started on that one, and many other practical ways. As educators, I think we should be looking at domains of learning as the related and interrelatedness of the different knowledge systems in a topic. So for example, hunting the buffalo, baking a cake, brushing your teeth, cleaning the water, diet, nutrition, pollution, a theatrical play, a sunset, growing a garden, any of those things. How does physics, chemistry, mathematics, biology, environmental science, music, art, technology come into these and work together in an interrelated way? Because they don't exist independently in the real world, although that is how they are perceived. Nothing is so cut and dried in real life. Well, maybe winning the lottery is. You either win or you don't. But then again, what is your definition of winning the lottery? It might be as simple as simply falling in love with the right person. So as a final note, we need to bridge cultures in a different way, in a two-eyed seeing way, beginning with the practical first, making it relevant to their culture and their lives in ways that enable learning so that they can connect the pieces of the puzzle. It's critical to note, though, that we are not changing the standards, as the curriculum criteria still have to be met. We are simply coming at it from different perspectives and meeting in the middle and using that knowledge to oscillate between the two paradigms. It's culturally responsive and, I might add, ethical education. In other words, let's each arrive and contribute to the liminal space in a different way. Where's my last slide? It's gone. Okay, so we'll just leave it there. It's gone. So anyways, when I teach, I always like to do a demonstration to illustrate my point. As I said, I get the students up to actually do that work. So today is no different. I want to leave you with a visual of what I mean by two-eyed seeing, oscillating between paradigms and inclusive education. So I need 4 volunteers. Thank you. 1, 2, just come on up. 2, that's 2. 3, 1 more. Oh, we can do that after. Who wants to be my Stirpley? Muriel. My Stirpley. Okay, so, Craig, I'm sorry, I stole stuff from the lab.
All right. As long as you return it, that's okay.
Oh, I have to return it. I was going to do like, okay, so, this is a meeting. PA, don't do anything yet. Okay.
Don't do it.
finger? No. Don't drink it, don't drink it. B, and C. Yeah. And C. Okay, so Muriel, you are the stir plate. So I couldn't bring a stir plate, I need a magnet and all that's really heavy. So usually it works, there's a magnet here and it stirs the solution so we don't have to do this. The old way is to do this. So Muriel, I can do that. Yeah, you can do this. I'm good at running in circles. Yeah, okay, so let's do it that way. Okay, so what do we need for a chemical reaction? Chemicals, that's good. What are they called?
Reactants.
Reactants, okay. So we have 3 sets of reactants here, A, B, and C. What do you notice about them? Qualitative observations.
Clear.
Clear. Okay. Do they smell?
No.
Did you try? You never stick your nose over there. I did that one time. I really wanted to put ammonia in one of them. I really did. No. Okay, so I'm going to get you to add yours to the mixing vessel. And you're going to stir. Well, not yet.
But once you start making
No, you pour yours and Muriel can start stirring after.
all of it.
Yeah, all of it. Just dump it all in. Okay, Muriel, start mixing. Okay, nothing's happening. Mix better. Okay, why isn't anything happening?
Because there's just a final one.
There's just one. Okay, why don't you put yours in there and see? No, I'll let you pour it.
Is that possible?
Okay, next. Swirl.
Yeah.
I thought you said you were good at going in circles.
Well, yeah.
On those
I
ones.
don't want to, damage the chairs and things.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll put a cork on it after you put yours in. So what's happening here? Okay, she's not mixing very well. We're stirring too much.
A little different.
You want to try?
Yeah. Okay, go for it.
Okay. Nothing's going to happen. So I'm going to let Mira. There's no
You're in for your example.
I'm just scared. Okay, so pour yours in there. And then Muriel start yours.
Okay, we're the same doing. Oh.
It's turning into beer.
Yeah.
Skip from beer.
It keeps swirling. It'll become wine.
Blue wine. And they're all clear liquids and
So that is my oscillating reaction, and that's what I think. We need to each come to the table with our own identities without assuming that we're going to assimilate one over the other and find something that we can talk about and meet in the middle and move forward.
No, it's going to change
You know, keep doing this for the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for that wonderful talk.